Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. This time, Schisms. Schisms. No schisms here. You want to talk to us? You want to find us? Real easy. It's All Been Checked Before on Facebook. Find us there. Not a schism. It's exactly as it's spelled, as it sounds. Come there. Talk to us about Trek. Talk to us about whatever you want, really. Just like we're going to talk right now about schisms on It's All Been Checked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome. We are here to talk the episode Schisms, which I definitely have seen before. First impressions.
I have definitely seen it as well.
I feel like I have a split between how I feel about this episode. No, actually, I don't. I don't think. Well, maybe I do. We'll find out, I guess. This is not one I loved.
Oh.
Yeah, I can say that. I did not love it. It felt like stuff we've done before. They've done before.
Yeah.
You know, felt like we tried this before. Again, and maybe this is something we've talked about a lot. Is like, but yet it's still not a terrible episode. Just not my favorite for sure.
Best episode of the series that was titled Schisms. Yes. I pretty much agree with what Steven just said. Seen it before. Not a standout. Not terrible, but not memorable. Not great. I mean, I remembered it. Not great.
I didn't remember it until when they got to the table scene, when they were in the holodeck trying to reconstruct the table.
Actually, yeah, and this will surprise you guys. I actually thought the holodeck, once again, was helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, it was interesting the way, it felt like the holodeck was reading their mind. I know they would give it a description and it would be like, what about this? And they would change a little bit. But it did a really good job of recreating.
I thought about making that joke as well, or maybe something even a little more, pointed. But it makes sense. And they did say at the beginning that the holodeck is sort of going through the catalog of all the possible types of tables. So maybe
okay.
I don't know.
I had some notes about that scene for sure, but we'll get to them.
Yeah,
that they really didn't skimp on the poetry. That was my first line.
They committed.
Yeah, it's that really ended up setting the tone for the entire episode, surprisingly to me. They did things in a way that I don't think I've seen before or since. Something they wouldn't have noticed at the time. But, the whole show not tell discussion we would typically get into, they didn't do any of that cutting away thing. It is you're going along with the ride for us, whether you like it or not. This is how it is going to be done. This is we're doing some hard science here. We're not going to summarize. Mm-hmm. We're going to show you exactly every step. And that poetry was a good example of them not doing like that fade out thing where it's like, well, Data says a couple of lines and they do like they turn to the clock and it turns forward or something. And then we're in it with Riker every second of the way and feeling it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, the Ode to Spot is a very famous, pivotal, very memorable moment in The Next Generation. It's often quoted, often thought about, talked about. I forgot it was in this episode. But I guess you could say that the poetry was kind of foreshadowing because the episode was technically correct in its structure and its execution, and yet we found it not emotionally appealing.
Well done. Because if you tell me, hey, it's going to be a presentation of anything about a cat, I'm like, I'm all ears. I'm here. And then I was like, then I was Riker. I was like, nope. I
loved the Spock poem. The rest of the other poetry, not so much.
Yeah.
But I love the Spock poem.
I didn't love it like I thought I would.
Read back the text off air and see if it speaks to you a little better.
Okay, I will do that.
I agree that it was clever, and that is something. If you're a writer and you have to do that, you're going to make sure everybody has to hear every single word. Or you should.
Writers are stupid. Their words are not worth much. Let's jump to the beginning of this episode. The Enterprise D is assigned to chat a vast region of unexplored space. And by my calculations, based on the numbers they were throwing out at the beginning, it's going to take them an entire month to document this region, 30 days, until Geordi comes up with some sensor trick that's going to reduce the time by 25%. But that's still like more than 3 weeks. That's a long time to be spending charting a territory.
And that's it, I guess. So thank you for coming.
We see Riker in the bathroom. We rarely see bathrooms on Star Trek, so it's nice to see the bathroom.
I found that very relatable, especially in my advancing middle age. The hair, the looking at the eyes, like or the bags under the eyes, whatever, all that stuff was very, very relatable. And I liked the Stardate clock. I thought that was very, very cool. I don't remember seeing one before. I'm sure
I didn't catch that.
but
I missed it too.
The clock on the clock he kept checking to see that he was late or whatever was very,
Well, I've got my first fashion note of the episode.
Fashion.
Do you like Riker's PJs?
Colleen said it looked like was wearing a sack. And I said, yeah, it looked really rough. I guess the idea was to show that, hey, I'm not getting good night's sleep. And we both agreed, like, I wouldn't get a good night's sleep with that either. Also, he slept on top of the covers. I mean, it's a classic Trek thing, but
in the future, they have the atmosphere set so perfectly that you don't need blankets. It will conform to your body.
And that was like Buck Rogers, our special episode. And eventually they revealed why they weren't sleeping because the issue. But I was up until then, so whoever suggested a milk hot toddy, wasn't that in this episode?
Yes.
Right? And I'm like, 24th century, we haven't figured out better ways to help people sleep yet? Come on. And oddly, and this is just the world we live in now, Google watches everything I do. Then I got 2 New York Times stories within the next day after watching this episode about how to get a better night's sleep. So
I actually liked his pajamas. I was surprised he showed off less of his chest than Picard does in his leisure.
Colleen did like that, and I did mention to her that we all agreed that showing off the chest is a staple of this show. Men and male and female. She was okay with that.
He's got the bedhead going on, and that bedhead persists. He doesn't bother to fix his hair before he leaves his quarters and goes on duty, which can't be regulation, but whatever. Then when we get to the poetry reading, it looked to me like Picard had a date, but I don't know if it was. I couldn't figure out who it was. So I was examining Memory Alpha on IMDb to see who was sitting next to Picard. I think it might be Lieutenant J, or Ensign J, who we'd seen before, Tracy Coco. I don't think it was the same woman that was in the holodeck later. That was
okay, because that's what I thought.
For a second, I thought it was, and then I was like, no, all women don't look alike. All short-haired women don't look alike. I'm pretty sure it was Ensign J sitting next to Picard, who we'd seen previously, but just briefly. I don't think she was his date, but for a second, the way they were sitting, it looked like they might have been on a date.
Mm-hmm.
Which intrigued me, but then it was never mentioned, so...
I think one of the other issues for Data was his poetry reading was in the afternoon, which I think is a
prime nap time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everyone's got their lunch and they're bye-bye. Like if it was early evening, maybe you get away with it. People have a couple drinks and they're relaxed, but not for sleeping. But yeah, to me, it was like, oh, that's 3:00 in the afternoon. That is go to bed time, go to sleep time.
They should have definitely all had coffee or Coca-Cola or something.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, product placement, just like they would still do in the future.
Back to the Future, we saw futuristic Pepsi. So
yes.
Everyone seems really bored, but Riker's not even hiding it. I mean, not even trying to hide it, which seems out of character and extra rude to me. But
yeah, I agree.
He's just that weak. You can't help it.
When Data talks about Ode to Spot, have we only seen that cat like twice? Like, I don't feel like we've justified Data's relationship with Spot at this point.
Well, this is how you build it. This is how you start to do the work of justifying it.
I guess, but by the time we get to Star Trek Generations, granted, I had not seen a lot of the Next Generation when I saw Star Trek Generations, but there's a moment between Data and Spot in that movie that's super moving, and I was moved, even though I hadn't seen a lot of the series. And now I'm wondering, should I have been moved? Because if Spot's barely in the show, maybe he's in the show a lot in the last season and a half, but if Spot's barely in the show, how do you even build that relationship?
Well, you've already answered your own question at the beginning. You've definitely seen this episode before. So that poem had etched itself under your psyche so that when the moment came up in Generations.
Yes.
It reminded me of a sonnet I wrote my senior year of high school that was very... How many big words can I put in this just to say I really like this girl in our class?
When Riker talks about his lack of sleep.
How many was it?
Several.
When Riker was describing his lack of sleep, it reminded me of just before I got my CPAP and how run down I was. So I figured Riker probably needed a CPAP. Except it only been 2 or 3 days for him, which, I mean, that was pretty extreme for only 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to that. Maybe not this week, but a couple weeks ago, I was definitely doing very little sleep for this or that reason. But no sleep is very relatable, I think. I think for most people.
Yeah.
I've been doing that for a while now. I think probably because of some of the medication,
Yeah.
stimulants and stuff. And so tonight I'm going to have to just take the drowsy allergy medication and just try to force myself to. It's like I get like maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and I'm just up. And
I mean, maybe you should just drink a hot milk toddy.
Or if you could do it like Spot and sleep for 4 hours, and then sleep for another 4 hours later, and then sleep for another 4 hours later.
6 times in a 24-hour period.
That was one of Kramer's sleeping things. Was like, I'm going to do it like cats, and then he did the Da Vinci thing where he's like, slept 2 hours a day. Are you crazy? Yeah. So then after the show, Data does the thing of, so what'd you think? And it's like, you never go up to somebody and ask them what they thought. And if you want an honest answer, at least you shouldn't. My favorite response to that was, I went to a set of plays at Ohio State once, and one of the playwrights was like, "Hey, you want to come?" I went with one of the playwrights, me and some other people, and right after, the student group that put it on was like, "What'd you think?" And the woman, the playwright, said, "This is not the time or place for that conversation," which I thought was such a great answer. It was a great way to get around saying, "I did not care for it," and she did not even break stride in giving that answer. So. I never ask anybody what they thought of the podcast. I just let people come up and tell me. The people that admit that they listen.
What do you think of it, Stephen?
The podcast?
I think it's great. This podcast, I think it's great.
I tell you what I think, but it's not really the time or place.
Nice.
I really enjoy doing it, so I'm just being facetious. Beverly gives Riker a hot toddy because she's now a homeopathic physician she's a McCoy instead of a modern physician for a second. She mentions she got the recipe from Picard's Aunt Adele, which I was really tickled by.
Wow.
That history of where the recipe came from.
Is that a character that has been mentioned before? Or?
I don't believe so, nor ever again. But I just enjoyed Beverly dropping that in because it is a great example, just a subtle hint of how close her and Picard are.
It seems like guest writers have a habit of sprinkling things like that in there. I'm wondering like how much leeway they had to do things like that, if they're doing that as almost like all right, let's say, Jimmy, you had the opportunity to write an episode of Modern Trek. Yeah. Would you just pull out all the stops and start throwing on those little Easter eggs and just inflating the canon left and right, and like, this is my signature right here. This little detail. I feel like people probably wouldn't be able to avoid the temptation. Maybe that's probably what would call out to people which ones were the actual fans or not. Maybe I don't.
Well, if he was writing for Lower Decks, that's nothing but Easter eggs. But if it was Easter eggs, might not be the right word. But.
Well, I was about to say Easter eggs probably isn't the right word for what I was saying either.
Right, right.
Flavor text, just the other little background things that you can throw in and say, I did this. I imprinted this on the canon.
Yeah,
we're terrible fans because this was actually, I looked up on Memory Alpha. This is the 3rd time Aunt Adele's been mentioned in the series.
Oh.
And final time.
Oh.
Her cure for the common cold was ginger tea with honey, which Picard replicated for Admiral Kennelly in the episode Ensign Row. And then in Cause and Effect last season, Aunt Adele's milk hot toddy was brought up as well. So this was the 2nd time the hot toddy came up. Adele was named for Star Trek assistant director Adele Simmons. And if you look up Aunt Adele in the Star Trek Encyclopedia, you'll see a picture of Adele Simmons, the assistant director, in place of Aunt Adele, even though only if you look up the 4th or the 1st edition, because her picture did not appear in later editions. But that's kind of fun. I'm sad that I never noticed before. It does mention she was on his paternal side, but no other details. Surely there's a novel that fills in the gaps. I'll have to look up Picard's Aunt Adele memory beta.
Yeah, good old Aunt Adele. She had a way of getting on your paternal side.
In memory beta, it just mentions these 3 episodes. There's no additional information. So apparently no author ever decided to expand on Annadelle in a novel, which I feel is just a criminal.
Well, there's your in.
Data asking what people thought of his poem. Jordy said the poems were clever but not emotional, which explains, I mean, that's the perfect description of Data, right?
Mm.
That it felt like we'd done this before. That is a thing. This opening, Data, you silly robot, you can't do these artistic things. Why do you keep trying to do it? I think I don't know if it would be the same as music in that sense. I suppose it would be easier to demonstrate to, well, yeah, certainly. It would certainly be easier to demonstrate to a lay audience. I'm going to use all these big words and they rhyme in this perfect meter. And it's just this neat little package. And I'm going to deliver it like I am right now. Me, Keith, talking the way that I am. I like the idea that again, they're bumping on that part where Data is unemotional. Therefore, he can take the criticism. You can be brutally honest with him. And there would be some great opportunities for comedy there if he just cleared the table after Jordy's comments. Just,
Are you upset with the review? No, I am fine.
That's just what I read you should do if you're criticized in that manner.
Nice.
Then the alarms go off because there's something in that cargo bay that sets them off. And they're like, quick, let's get to the cargo bay. And then we get this scene of Worf and Crusher and their teams just leisurely striding down the hall. I mean, not at all urgent.
Yeah, which I feel like is this whole episode. It's not urgent.
You're not wrong.
I know a lot of them aren't getting a good night's sleep, but yeah.
Pick up the pace a little bit, people.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be an emergency. Then we see the hot toddy, and it's white. Aren't hot toddies usually brown?
Yeah, but I thought she said it was a milk hot toddy or something like that.
Yes, it is. But don't all hot toddies have milk in them? Or?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Colleen's been drinking some for the last week. There's variations, but I think it's...
Classic hot toddy is water, whiskey, honey.
Whiskey. Yeah. She was drinking those last
juice, cinnamon stick.
Yep.
Which actually looks like yellow. So obviously a milk hot toddy would have milk in it as well.
Yeah.
But I would still think it would look a little brown. I don't know. I Googled milk hot toddy and they looked brown in like every picture I saw. I'm grumpy without sleep too. That's pretty relatable, except he like overacts and takes it to the extreme, which I guess is for the effect of they're not thinking their audience is smart, so they have to overdo it.
Right.
Playing to the cheap seats.
Yeah.
What was the episode where no one was getting sleep?
That was one of the Troy ones, wasn't it? Where she was stealing it from them, or was that the dreams?
Something like that. This just took me back to that. Like,
we get the scene of Mott in the barbershop, so we know something's wrong with Worf as well. But a couple problems with that scene. One, it doesn't look like he's cutting the hair at all. It's very clear he's not even trying. Like, he's just snipping the scissors behind the wig. And second, I didn't notice this before, but that barbershop is carpeted, which seems like a terrible floor covering for a barbershop.
Huh. Yeah, it does. I commented that Worf's hairdresser is very much like mine and always asking, are you using conditioner? But Night Terrors is the episode I was referencing.
Ah, yes. It was not a good one.
No, it was.
So it's very clear Worf and Geordi are being affected too. And we've got Geordi, who's gone 1 minute, but then Data's said he was gone 90 minutes, or vice versa. So Data loses time. Right. So now it's affecting. Then I started to think, well, it's going to affect everybody, right? Because Geordi, Worf, Data, but no, it's just them. And it's just forcing your officers and this one random person who doesn't even have a rank on IMDb, Camander.
Yeah.
Played by Angelina Fiordelisi.
Yeah.
That's just the way it shook out. It really was that random. You know, they just kind of threw lots in a cup and just that's what they came up with.
Just for the senior staff.
Yep.
Okay.
And this one woman. Yeah.
This actress is best known for Where the Heart Is and this role.
Oh, yeah.
According only 14 credits on IMDb, only Star Trek credit, no Seinfeld. But she did do an episode of Roseanne and an episode of The Cosby Show. So
yeah, she did all right for herself. But yeah, I thought the same thing and also Data was affected, right?
Well, Data they just wiped his memory from the time he was gone.
Okay.
So like emotionally, you're asking?
I meant because that makes sense then. Because I didn't understand why he wasn't in the holodeck to help with that.
Right. He didn't have memory, so he wouldn't have been able to help with that.
Should data be fixed so that can't happen?
I don't know how you would.
I don't know either, but I feel like I don't know what kind of
update patch.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of defense system you would build in there that would be like, nope, unable to delete or whatever. But because what if they deleted all of his memory? I mean, I know Uhura's they brought back in Changeling. It seems like you would not want to risk losing everything that Data's got in there. So you could put something in there, like if it constantly resaved or was moved to the cloud, which I know wasn't a thing then. It seems like you would constantly be backing up Data's stuff somewhere. Yeah, data. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Data's data.
I couldn't think of the word.
That's amazing.
But yeah, why wouldn't you? I feel like that should be backed up. But I know that's completely outside the scope of this episode. But anyway, I thought a lot of the science at the end was just kind of like Data's poems, just people saying a lot of big words that meant nothing to me. Just like, although I will say I have read the Spot. I reread the Spot thing. Yeah, very. I like. But yeah, I just thought like you could just be going blah 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 blah, and it would relate the same thing. And I know, I'm sure that happens lots of times in good episodes, and I'm like, oh, this is really good. But in this one, I think it was just like, okay, all right. I know there's another dimension, and you know when Riker goes into it, it just all it made me think of was Poltergeist, but it was not a great effect. I'm chipping my hand because next week we get into another Q episode, but it looked like when Corbin Burnson, when he pops in, that was for a comedic effect. That was funny, but Riker going into the Poltergeist hole, it looked the same way, and it shouldn't be funny. But I was just like, that's super cheesy. So, you know. But,
well, even before that, when we get to the holodeck scene where they're trying to figure out what's going on, they're asked to describe the shape of the table, and one of them says long. Long is not a shape. Just saying. They also, I thought it was very odd the way the table changed in a lot of places, because when they first mention as an incline, it completely changes to a different type of table with a big frame around it, which wasn't there. And then when they say it's metal, all of a sudden it has like the support tower next to it, which nobody said anything about a support tower, dudes. We're just talking about a metal table.
It's a package deal. It's just they were just that precise. You know, they got the catalog. They have all these different these detailed variations, and is what you can't get that table anywhere in the galaxy without that tower.
Surely there's an inclined metal table that doesn't have the tower. It felt like they were skipping some steps.
So we started talking about the holodeck thing and everything, the computer tonight. This would be I have a different alternate episode, but my alternate episode would be that they keep describing this thing, and the holodeck just wants to make it some kind of S&M thing, just over and over. Just no matter what they say, it drives to an S&M kind of device. And it's just like, come on.
Then you have Riker going, no, that's the table that's in my quarters. That's not what we're talking about.
They always include the ball gag. Every table.
Colleen, when they went to the holodeck and it was all the yellow lines or whatever, she never realized that that's what was going on in Community when
they made their holodeck.
Yeah, she never put it together till that moment. So that was fun.
The thing that really bothered me about the holodeck scene is each person would tell the group, "Hey, it had this computer." Add this, and they repeat themselves twice. Like, you don't need to tell the group and then tell the computer. Just tell the computer.
That reminds me of when somebody will be in a meeting will be like, hey, Woos, you might want to tell them this. And I'm like, you just did. Yeah. Well, just say. You don't have to. You know, I think they're just trying to be nice, whatever. It's like, no, just say it. I trust you.
I will say, for as frustrating as the table sequence was, once they got to the knife that was above them, that one, it actually changed based just on their description and didn't have any giant changes. So their props department needed to do a little bit better, but they probably had limited time and budget. Riker finds out his arm was severed. I really wish we had follow up on that some other time.
Yeah.
They just amputated it and then put it back. Oh, wow, that's intense.
Yeah,
it's a good test. It's a good experiment.
Yeah, I mean, I know at the end it's like, well, maybe these are people I want to talk to, and then might be my favorite part of the episode is Riker's like, nah, this is done for a reason. Something's up. But then I feel like we we probably never come back to this. So
No.
they're not anyone we cross paths. Well, though maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe in Picard season 3, they're finally gonna.
Maybe, but I doubt it.
This can be in the Riker series.
So they're having a group think about what do we do about this? And Riker's like, well, they're going to take me anyway. We can't prevent it. And Picard's like, yep, we can't prevent it. So let's just slap. It's like, no, you're not even going to try to save your first officer or any of your crewmen. There's still a crewman missing at this point. They don't care. Yeah. Picard's the one that has the plan, though, which I'm like, this was kind of a Riker episode, but they kept shifting away from him at key moments. And that was a little disappointing.
Yeah. And just to go back to Ensign Rager, when they're like, oh, yeah, and she's missing, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wait, you kind of glossed over that. What was the other part of there you said? Mm-hmm. The woman who was controlling the ship a little earlier, she's gone. Okay. Just want to make sure I understood this correctly. Okay. Continue, please. Yeah.
And that wrist cuff they put on Riker for whatever mechanical, whatever they wanted to do, that's very obtrusive. Like, there wasn't like a little chip they could hide behind his head or in his uniform or something. Like, I feel like, the aliens just picked it up, and set it to the side. It's like, what are you doing? Yeah, then we had the floating Riker, which was a decently cool effect, in my opinion. But then they bring him, and they don't do anything to him. He's just sitting on the table, has plenty of time to do whatever he wants to. They come over, they empty his pockets, then they walk away again. Like, before they only take him for an hour. Well, I guess they only took Data for an hour. They've been keeping Riker all night. But again, this never explains why he's so sleepy, because if they think he's asleep and they leave him asleep for their experiments, because he doesn't have like waking memory of it, I don't know. It was very confusing and not well explained.
Yeah.
And then I did like the idea of the pocket universe with the dimensions and the subspace stuff. I just didn't understand it. The aliens looked okay, but part of me really wanted them to just be Little Gray Men, which is my alternate episode. That's just like a typical UFO. Because by the time we get to the holodeck scene and they're describing the table, I'm like, oh, so this is just your typical alien abduction story. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, and that would have been more interesting if it'd been more like the Kate McKinnon. Her final.
Oh my God!
Segment,
I love that segment. I don't know what it is. It just gets me every time.
So this episode, the teleplay was by Brandon Braga, but the story was by Jean-Louise Mathias and Ronald Wilkerson. They co-wrote 4 scripts together. This is the second that's been performed. The first one was Imaginary Friend, which was another creepy sci-fi, not very well written episode. With the little girl that could only see the other. Yeah. They have 2 more episodes coming up. I don't remember Lessons at all, but Lower Decks people really like. It's, the story like the ensigns below the decks. So
okay.
I'm looking forward to that. I don't know about Lessons, but yeah, I was like, they wrote a terrible, crappy sci-fi episode, and then you let them write another crappy sci-fi episode? Okay. And it was directed by Robert Weiner, who
write a good
we've
one.
Talked about before. I'm sorry?
I said you're not going to let him write a good one after that. You have to trust him.
I also wrote 2 Voyager episodes together.
Oh, okay. I only had one other note, which was Troy's hair, which this will continue in the next week. It looks like it's permy and tied up, kind of, and it looks like it's a wig.
I'm sure it was. Morgan walked in to the room. What was the big poofy with the little tie up? And she's like, "What did they do to her hair? It used to look so pretty."
Yeah, I had the same reaction, and I'm like, "Okay, there's still a good amount of hair, but I still think it's a wig. It still looks cute, but it's nothing like what we're used to." So,
that reminds me.
I definitely remember that hairstyle. Reminds you of what?
The whole table thing. Just I would guess that the backstage reason for that would be like when you're at the theater and you have all these props come up in the script, and it's like, well, what do we have that might look sort of like that? Mm-hmm. Well, here are the tables we have. Yeah.
Well, they probably had to get some more tables, and it was like, well, they're not all going to look the same because we have limited time and budget. But
yep, I was still impressed by. It just seemed unusual the way that they stuck with things. They didn't pull away from going through every detail of like the table scene, for example. At least the logic of it, which I appreciated. The 20 questions sort of process they were going through, I kind of like that. But other than that, I don't know.
Who is your annoyance in Schisms?
I'm probably alone in this, but Data's bad poetry reading. That's who I would.
I'm going to go with Riker for his overacting. Sorry.
That's right.
Both good choices.
I know, that's why we picked them.
Yeah, I'll go with Riker.
Who do you want to have a drink with?
Ensign Rager. I may have picked her before. I don't know. We talked before. She was in a couple episodes of Seinfeld, and George wanted to dip his bald head in oil and rub it all over. From I think that's a Emmy-nominated episode of Seinfeld.
And why wouldn't it be?
Yeah, that's also my alternative episode. Is I want to see what her experience was, because I have a feeling hers was different than Riker's, but maybe not. But I'm willing to roll the dice and gamble that it's a lot more interesting than what we got out of the rest of the episode. So I would have liked to see what was going on there.
Yeah, I'm going to have a hot toddy with Bev.
Data. I feel like I could probably give better advice than Jordy did. Just like, it's
no
clever. That's clever. That's clever. Yeah. Okay.
So, ranking the episode, better or worse than Realm of Fear?
Are you torn on this? Is there I'm
below.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll kill the suspense. Me too. It's below. Sorry, Keith.
Below that is Man of the People.
Yeah, this one's worse than that, I suppose.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't particularly care for this one, but I would say this is better than that.
I forgot. Yeah, I separate certain things from the episode themselves. I mean, like they obviously. I don't know. I felt like at the time we were talking about it, your opinion was greatly influenced by your opinion of the character too. So I don't know.
I think you're correct.
I recall Marianne classically usually had problems like that as well, separating the characters from the actual.
Yeah, I don't feel, but in this case, I have a strong reaction to that character.
I thought he was delightful. No, I did.
A role model.
I think I would go put Schisms below that.
Below Man of the People.
Below Man of the People.
Okay.
Yeah.
So below that is Time Zero Part 2. Interestingly enough, I would probably go below Time Zero Part 2.
Why can't I remember anything?
That was the season opener, Part 2.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Because they fixed the timeline with their time travel, so now you don't remember it.
Yeah. This might be above that for me. This might be above Time Zero.
You were saying above, Jimmy, or below?
I said below. Keith said above. Even though we said
yes.
the previous episode.
Yeah,
Finally.
I'd go below.
You go below?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't feel super strongly about these bottom three. I just don't. I feel like we've had 5 episodes and 3 of them have not been good, which is disappointing, and it's not the track record this show has had the last couple seasons.
Wait, did you say Trek record?
I did not, but I should.
It did sound like that.
Maybe I misspoke and didn't even notice it. I don't know. But yeah. So that's this episode. Short. Sorry about our lack of energy. We had a hard time getting excited about this one. We will have more to say and get more excited, I hope, about True Q next week, when an honor student in the medical field is assigned to the Enterprise in an internship manner. She begins to demonstrate the powers of the Q, prompting you-know-who to show up.
I anticipate having many strong feelings next week.
I got a lot more notes.
Colleen will as well. So.
Is she going to be joining us for that episode?
She will not be joining us, but she definitely chimed in a couple times. We were very much on the same wavelength about a certain aspect of next week's episode.
Well, until then, live long
in your dreams and prosper.
And just to give everybody a heads up, we've decided to change the name of the show to Trek Record. That's what we should have named it to begin with. Those years ago, I don't know why I didn't think of it. That would have been really good.
It would have certainly been shorter.
That's when we'll review all the actual records made by the cast members. That'll be Trek Record.
In alphabetical order.
Yeah.
Backwards.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?